episode 139. Hi, and welcome to the Vulnerable Scientist podcast. This is your host, Sarah Nyakeri, and I am too excited today. I think so. I don't know. But on this episode, I thought I should just do a catch up and just to know what's going on and all that. So far, I have been off. My contract ended with ILRI, and I have been away for about two weeks and or more. And for that 2 weeks, I've been trying to rest. I'm not really rested, but I've been trying to rest. I've been trying to, get a hold of myself and get a hold of me as a human being. And I was hoping to have done a lot of by that time, but I've not done so much that I expected. But I've been able to record some episodes, some recordings. I've been able to upload them and edit them, not the way I was hoping to have done, but that's done and all that. I've been privileged to have a conversation with various people, and some of the recordings, or rather the conversations, are not up yet. But I'm hoping to edit them and upload them, so be expecting that. Something else, just to tell you that I was hoping that we would work together, me and you as the listener, and I would like to know what's going on. What do you think about the podcast? What do you like about the podcast? What do you think should be improved when it comes to the podcast and all that? When it comes to the content, when it comes to the quality of the audio, when it comes to anything, just any input, because you're the listener and you're the one who's benefiting from this. As much as this is a very kind of selfish project, I would like to be selfish with you and, tell me what you think about it and what you hope to get from it in terms of content, in terms of anything when it comes to this podcast. So for you to do that, kindly click on the link on the show notes on a SpeakPipe link that will show you where to record your message. You can also go to the website, thevulnerablescientist.com, and on the first page you'll see a record button, and you can record your message. You can also DM me on Twitter. You can also on the TV Scientist Pod handle, DM me on the Facebook page or LinkedIn. LinkedIn, can you really DM? No, you can't DM on LinkedIn, but you can reach me out in any other way. You can also email thevulnerablescientist@gmail.com, and I will get your feedback. I'll be glad to hear from you and what you think about the podcast. But the more the audio, the better, because I don't know, I feel like audio is very intimate and it's very, it's just, I just love it. I just love audio, just love listening to people, as you can tell so far. The other thing is, yes, we have a website, as I mentioned before. We have a website, the Vulnerable Scientist Podcast. I've been thinking of, just uploading the content there in terms of an embed player, because I don't think I have enough storage when it comes to storing the podcast there, and also bandwidth to do that. So I'll just put an embedded player there so that you can listen to it. If you don't want to use an app on the website, you can also find other links to other places where the website is and easily, connect to that. The other thing that you can do is you can get anything, resources, things like books that the speaker or guests recommended, or YouTube channels, or podcast, or anything, or links to a website that the guest talked about. You can find them under every single person's page, because I'll create a page for every single guest, just an intro of them, then a link to their podcasts, then the resources that they provided and anything related to them, where you can find them and all that, like the contact details according to what they give, and links to their maybe a LinkedIn profile or a website or anything that's related to that specific guest. The other thing, I will also post transcripts of the recordings that we have, so that either for if you want to quote, if you want to read, if you prefer reading when you're, listening to the podcast, or also if there's someone who can't hear, or if you know someone who cannot hear, who's physically challenged in that way, so that they can they can benefit from this podcast still, but in terms of reading the transcript. The other thing is I'm happy that I've been able to collaborate with various people when it comes to, you know, exchanging ideas when it comes to the podcast. And I'm so super grateful for Anchisa, who I'll be working with her from Saturday on a volunteer basis, where I'll be, learning from her what she does with her podcast when it comes to social media marketing, because that's something I want to be more serious about when it comes to my podcast. I think it's more just learning how to work with people, because I do social media. It's just that it's not as frequent as I would have hoped it to be, but yeah, that's the plan. I'm also glad to have been on various podcasts, such as the Access to Perspective podcast by Joe Haveman, or Yo Haveman, depending on where you come from. She is the podcast host for Access to Perspectives. She's also the founder of Africa Archives, which is a scholarly communication platform to share preprints and such in open access fashion, and also share what productions in terms of scientific outputs that are there. That's one. The other one is the first one, which I was able to be part of with Siakula Digital, with Nonsikelelo, who is the director of the Siakula Digital, where they do science communication and science marketing. And she has been on this podcast. If you want to listen to her story, you can just search her name on any podcast platform that you have, Nonsikelelo Amanda Saki. And she brought me to her podcast, and she does Instagram lives with science communicators, and yeah, that's something you might want to check out. That's also on YouTube. Also, this podcast is on YouTube if you're interested too. I've been able to be a guest on Anchisa came to this podcast. If you also want to listen to her, she's a PhD student at University of KwaZulu Natal under crop science, and she's doing some research to do with poop. So that's interesting. She's also the host of the Root of the Science podcast, and she was able to come to a podcast and tell her story, and I was able to go to her podcast, and the piece will be out, I think, next week, so you can also listen to that. We've also been able to be featured on BBC Radio Hour, where they recommend podcasts to listen to, and on the science, recommending, when they were recommending science podcasts, they recommended this podcast as the first podcast, though it's not like really sciencey, but they were able to recommend that because of what the podcast is doing and what the podcast is trying to achieve when it comes to science communication. I've been also able to talk to a few people when it comes to collaboration with TCC Africa, which does scholarly communication and science communication training for scientists, and it has been training scientists since 2006. And I'm happy to also be to get to a place where we now can collaborate when it comes to doing feature podcasts on each other's podcasts, and just reaching you guys with different contents and variety of contents and things that are meaningful. I am happy also to tell you that we have had about 33 guests on this podcast. And I think the reason why we have a lot of episodes is that we have very long conversations, and it's very hard to post more than 2 hours of conversation in just one go, because of the podcast listening platform that I'm using, that if I reduce that quality, then I'll get that size with the same length. But that would not be good when it comes to the quality of the audio. So I thought it's best when I just produce a small kind of content. Also, it also helps with the consumption, because I don't know, I feel like most people wouldn't listen to something that is more than a 1 hour conversation. So I've been cutting them in 15 to 1 hour, sometimes even 8 minutes, depending on the topic, so that, if you're interested in a certain topic that is specific to that, you can listen to that. There are people, the listeners who do not like that. They want to have the whole recording in one go. And I thought about republishing or repurposing the previous content from the previous time. So I'll find all the content that has been split and reproduce that into one episode, so that anyone who's interested to listen to one just particular episode that doesn't have like being cut into different topics or different parts of the conversation, to do that, so that I cater for every one of you guys. I'm also happy to announce that I was able to finish my fellowship, and I think I mentioned that earlier, at ILRI, for the research I was doing. I was looking for new vaccine targets for contagious pneumonia that affects cattle, and when it comes to the school side, of course I've been struggling with that, because now being vulnerable enough, I've been vulnerable all the time. It's just that now this part is a bit negative, because the school, Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, where I'm registered as a MSc Molecular Biology and Bioinformatics student, they have not been able to get me past their proposal. It's been a lot of back and forth, and that has really dragged me. And since that is happening, I thought, how about I just want to continue doing this podcasting full time, and also seeking for opportunities when it comes to communication, so that I can up my skills when it comes to that sector of my life, because I intend to pursue both careers, science communication and being a scientist, and I really want to find a balance when it comes to being able to do them in the utmost, concentrating with them with the utmost I can give it. And so my that's where my headspace is, and I'm happy to see that I'll have time to concentrate more on this podcast, and even make it better when it comes to editing, especially the noise, not the content, and also producing. I've been thinking about, apart from the content that I'm currently producing, which is now just stories about a specific person who comes and tells their story. This is something I will not stop doing, but I'm thinking of also adding a different show in the Vulnerable Scientist podcast, where we're just talking about like it's a panel where people having discussions about a particular topic. For example, the use of social media as a science communication tool for a scientist, or just as a way of life. Like, is it something that scientists engage in, and just having different people who have different views when it comes to that, and just coming to have a discussion about that. What I'm struggling with that is, since I'm only doing remote podcasting, it's pretty hard to find a tool that is free, that has good audio, that will allow me to record each and every one separately, each and every one of the guests separately. There is Zoom, but that comes with a limit of 40, and it has very bad audio. And I don't know how I feel about having it, but maybe I might come to compromise if I don't find a platform that I can use to do that. So if you know a platform that can help me do that, kindly reach out and let me know, so that I can go ahead and do this. I'm really passionate about it. I would like to have people who have different views come to the podcast and just have a discussion about a particular topic when it comes to a scientist career, or things related to science and all that. So that's something I'm really excited about. The other thing that I've been thinking about is just having previous guests on this podcast coming back and just telling us what's going on. Just a small kind of podcast episode, a very small kind of a podcast episode like that. It's not so long, just an update. Okay, so what's going on? How are you? What's going on? What has happened since we had this last conversation? So that maintains its space of just being a space for scientists to just talk about what's going on in their lives in a really vulnerable way. And yeah, and also just sharing if there are any new developments when it comes, maybe they graduated or they got this funding, or something great has happened in their lives. So just coming to share, and just, or something crazy has happened, for example. Yeah, just sharing what's going on in their journey. So just having that space to do that, I want, was because that was the initial idea of the podcast. I really still want to do that. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that, what kind of questions I'm going to ask, what is just be a normal informal conversation that we'll be having. In terms of time period, I'm thinking about having a very short conversation, but I'm not very sure of how that would happen. But yeah, it's something it's still in the conception stage. The other thing is that I'm planning to have articles on the website, articles that has a summary of every single episode, so that it's like having a story, a feature story of someone and their journey and how they got to where they are, or also having an article that includes every single person who was in a podcast, or different people, and maybe science communication, just having a topic about science communication, or having a topic about supervisors, or having a topic about just a story about something that will be gotten from the previous recordings, and just writing it down in summary, so that anyone who's interested in such kind of content can be able to can know that this kind of content, if they're interested to know more about the content, they can go back to the individual podcast recordings and listen to it. And also, if they're interested to have a story about something, they know who to talk to. I'm also planning to talk in that article perspective, just talking about the science that people are doing, and having even the previous science that people have done, so that we can have like an article or a blog about that science that they did in the in the simplest manner, so that if someone is interested in this kind of scientist, they are able to reach out to them specifically, and knowing the story, even listen to the story even before approaching them. And it's like creating a certain sort of hub for scientists who are doing this different kinds of science and all that, or from different kinds of places. So it's just a way also to just put scientists out there for just for their stories to be known and their kind of science to be known, so that there's a higher possibility of their work being funded for everyone's sake. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I've talked a lot. I'm glad that you're still here. What you can do how can you help this podcast yourself? You can help this podcast by first listening to the stories, sharing the feedback to me, and telling me what you think and what messages you have. Maybe if you want to send a specific message to the guest, I can help you do that. I can help you reach out. If you're interested in a certain scientist, I can help you reach out to them. So you can help us by sharing the stories, listening to them, sharing the stories, reviewing the stories either directly, or better still, reviewing the stories on the podcast listening platform that you're using. That can be Apple Podcast, Podcast Addict, Castbox, any place that Spotify. You can even rate on Spotify. Anywhere you can review this podcast, kindly review this podcast, so that other people who are interested in this kind of content can get this content. Because if you do that, then that increases its viewability, like the chances of it being seen by someone else who you actually don't know. The other thing that you can do is sharing this podcast with other people who are close to you, your friends, your social media platforms, anyone who might be interested in this kind of content. Kindly share it to them, because these stories that we tell, or the stories that are being shared by this particular people, are very important stories, and you'll have made a great deal of something by sharing these stories to other people, and that by you increasing the the traffic to this kind of content will help this podcast to grow and also be able to support itself when it comes to getting sponsors for this podcast and all that. The other thing that you can do is you can donate to this podcast either using PayPal or Patreon. That for Patreon, you just Google patreon.com/The Vulnerable Scientist, and you can always contribute to that. You can also contribute that if you're in Kenya through M-Pesa, or if you're in a country that has M-Pesa, or you can send through Sendwave if you're in the US or any other country that supports Sendwave to M-Pesa. Then you can do that. You can also do PayPal through the email, the Vulnerable Scientist at Gmail, so that you can support us. You can also find those links on any platform, either the website or the show notes of any kind of podcast that you're listening to. The other thing that you can do is share this content and tag this content so that the content has visibility. The other thing that you can do is letting other people know what I do, which is creating websites for scientists, or managing social media for scientists, or anything to do with science communication when it comes to scientists, and uploading them. You can let other people know what I'm doing so that I can get a sort of source of income so that I can be able to maintain these podcasts. Why am I saying this? Why do you need to support? Because when it comes to podcast production, I think this is our conversation that we had with Emmanuel Kesiangani, who was the recent guest on this episode. Is when it comes to maintaining a podcast, you need Wi-Fi, you need the personnel who's supposed to help you editing and all that. I need to support myself so that I don't focus on something else. I'm able to maintain the podcast while still and doing so much with the podcast, and also getting more help from other people, because I can't bring someone to help me with anything to do with the podcast if I'm not giving them something. Like it's not the right way to do things. I can do it myself, but of course with minimal. When it comes, if I get something else to do, that will be very minimal. So that takes away the attention from the podcast, and even decreases the kind of content that is there, like in terms of quality and the quantity of the content, and how good the content is. If someone really focuses on one thing, then they're able to do something great about that content. So there's the Wi-Fi that someone uses. There's when it comes to production, uploading, doing the podcast itself, and also the things that come with the where things are held, when it comes to social media tools to use, especially in sharing content that needs money. Also when it comes to cutting the clip. And I've also been thinking about this panel of discussions that I was telling you about. I've been thinking about doing them as video podcasts, and that is hard to do that. Especially I was thinking about doing them, if I can do them in person. TCC Africa has been kind enough to offer me a space to do that. So I'll have a space in Kenya to do for people who I can do them in person. But when it comes to remote record, and that will require, when it comes to in-person recording, that requires a lot of equipment to have a great podcast. It needs mics, it needs cameras, it needs lights and all that. But when it comes to remote recording, one of the main things that someone will need is lights. I have a microphone, of course, but a good space to do that podcast recording in. The other struggles that I'm having right now is actually today I'm supposed to be recording a podcast. Yesterday I recorded a podcast, and I came home to record a podcast because where I was living, I'm living with someone who's helping me get a space, but the person came back to use the space. So I had to find an alternative space. People are very kind enough, and I'm happy about that. So I still have that space, but it's not a very reliable space when it comes to recording when I need to record. So I came back home, and yesterday when I was recording it, the second part of it, I think you will hear it when you'll see the difference in terms of audio quality when I finally get to release that recording. It will be in, I think, in 2 weeks. I'll release that recording because I have something tomorrow. So next week, I mean. So I really struggle because of the noise that is around, and that's, you're in someone else's space. So that's a very different thing. And also the network and all that. Like, there's a lot of things that went down yesterday, and I was like, wow, this is not happening again. So today I'm supposed to be recording something, and I'm struggling to get a space that I can just, record, just a space to record. And I think I've spent most of the day just, as talking to different people and seeing, oh, do you have a space? Do you have a space? And, that kind of, I don't know, it's kind of frustrating. So those were one of the struggles that I've been having when it comes to producing this podcast. So that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it for now. So I'm glad that you're supporting us and you're loving what we're doing, because if I'm getting a download, that tells me that there's someone who was interested in my kind of content, and this is what they might be feeling about it. But I would love you to reach out in any sort of way, either through the email, as I mentioned earlier, and just reach out and tell me what you think about this podcast. Just be part of this journey. Let's do this together. So I'm going to leave this at 27 minutes because I am exactly 27. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode of this podcast. That is next week, where I'll be producing One Boy's podcast, Caroline's podcast, and the rest.